Okay, 1. God is, the real self is. And the key idea, the deepest truth of existence is that God is the source of all life and the soul's true self exists eternally within that divine reality. And from the Edgar Cayce readings, the Lord thy God is one. The self, as an individual entity, body, mind, and soul, is one. The soul is a child of God, or a thought, a corpuscle in the heart of God. Yet the entity, thine own soul, has been given a will to use the attributes of soul, mind, and body to thine own purposes. Thus, as the individual entity applies self in relationship to those facts, the entity shows itself to be a true child, or a wayward child, or a rebellious child of the creative force or God. The will then to be one with that creative force and thus fulfill the purposes for which the entity entered this present sojourn is an evidence of the conditions just stated. If one accepts the fact that God is, and that the ego, the thought of self, is his offspring. This is the accepting of the fact that ye always were, ye always will be, dependent upon the relationship or upon that ye do with thy will. Reading 3376-2. For as thy brother, as thy fellow man, is as thyself a representative, a portion of that love, that hope, that soul, that is the kinship to the Father God, so as ye treat thy fellow man, ye do it unto thy Maker. Reading 1151-1. The deepest truth of existence is that God is the source of all life, and the soul's true self exists eternally within that divine reality. Edgar Cayce describes the soul as a child of God, and even as a thought within the heart of the Creator. Human beings are therefore not separate from God in origin, but carry within themselves a spiritual and eternal nature. Yet every soul has also been given free will, the power to choose how it will use the mind, body, and spirit. Through these choices, a person may live in harmony with love, truth, and divine purpose, or become distracted by selfishness and separation. The reading teaches that spiritual growth occurs when the individual willingly aligns their will with the creative force, becoming one with God in purpose and consciousness. Life itself is therefore not random, but part of the soul's ongoing journey of development, where every thought, action, and relationship helps shape the condition of the eternal self. Things to consider. Throughout the day, pause before important actions or conversations and silently ask, does this thought or action express my higher self or my lower self? This transforms spirituality from theory into daily living. The exercise is not about escaping the world, but learning to live within it, while remembering one's divine origin and purpose.
Chapter 2, we are part of God and we affect everyone we contact. Key idea, because every soul comes from God, our thoughts, words and actions influence and shape the lives of everyone we meet. And from the Edgar Cayce readings, ye are part and parcel of a universal consciousness, or God, and thus of all that is within the universal consciousness or the universal awareness, as the stars, the planets, the sun, the moon. Do ye rule them, or they rule thee? They were made for thine own use as an individual. Yea, that is the thought which thy Maker, thy Father, God, thinks of thee. For ye are as a corpuscle in the body of God, thus a co-creator with him in what you think, in what you do. And you change each soul you contact, literally or mentally, insofar as ye, an individual entity, are a witness for or against the Lord thy God. No soul may come in contact with the entity without being changed, either in body, in mind, or in purpose. And purpose is, of course, of the soul. Explanation. Reading 2794-3 teaches that human beings are deeply connected to God and to one another through what Cayce calls a universal consciousness. Every soul is described as a corpuscle in the body of God, meaning that human beings are not isolated individuals, but living parts within a greater spiritual reality. Because of this connection, thoughts, words, attitudes, and actions carry creative power and influence the lives of others. Cayce teaches that no person comes into contact with another without causing some kind of change, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or physically. Human beings are therefore co-creators with God, constantly shaping the world around them through the energy and consciousness they express. The reading also warns against becoming controlled by fear, materialism, or external forces, emphasizing instead the soul's freedom and responsibility to choose love, truth, wisdom, and spiritual growth. Life's true purpose is not found merely in material success, but in learning how to use our influence to bring healing, compassion, and positive transformation into the lives of others. Things to consider. Whenever you encounter someone difficult, stressed, angry, or hurting, silently bless them inwardly instead of reacting negatively. Silently think, may this soul receive peace, strength, wisdom, and healing. This changes not only the other person, but also your own consciousness.
So number 3 is, in the beginning, God created us as companions. And the key idea is, in the beginning, God created souls to freely share in his love, life, and spiritual companionship. And the Edgar Cayce readings, and the question is, the first problem concerns the reason for creation. Should this be given as God's desire to experience himself, or God's desire for companionship, or God's desire for expression, or in some other way? And the answer is God's desire for companionship and expression. And that's reading 5749-14. The first cause was that the created would be the companion for the creator, that it, the creature, would, through its manifestations, show itself to be not only worthy of, but companionable to the creator. And that's reading 5753-1. For that are indeed a God in its making, for he would have thee as one with him. Yet the choices must be made by thee, or else you become only as an automaton. And that's reading 1440-1. Another reading, for a man is a little lower than the angels, yet was made that he might become the companion of the creative forces, and thus was given in the breath of life the individual soul, the stamp of approval, as it were, of the Creator, with the ability to know itself and to make itself as one with the creative forces, irrespective of other influences. That's reading 1456-1. And the explanation, these readings present creation as something deeply personal and relational, rather than merely mechanical or impersonal. Edgar Cayce teaches that humanity came into existence through God's desire for companionship and expression, meaning that souls were created to freely share in divine love, life, and conscious relationship with the Creator. Human beings were not made simply to obey automatically, but to become willing companions capable of self-awareness, creativity, love, and spiritual partnership with God. Each person carries within themselves an individual soul and the freedom to choose whether they will move toward harmony with the creative forces or away from them. The readings emphasize that true relationship cannot exist without free will, because love must be freely chosen rather than forced. Life, therefore, becomes a spiritual journey where the soul gradually develops through its choices, learning how to reflect divine qualities such as wisdom, compassion, love, and unity. In this view, the purpose of life is not merely material success or survival, but the conscious development of the soul into loving cooperation and companionship with the Creator. Things to consider. Several times throughout the day, pause inwardly for a few moments. Quietly remind yourself, God is present here also. Practice this during work, family life, gardening, conversations, driving, stressful situations, quiet moments, nature walks. This exercise gradually transforms spirituality from an abstract belief into a living awareness carried through daily life. And that's the end of number 3.
Number 4. We were souls in the beginning, without flesh bodies. Key idea. Before earthly life, humanity existed as spiritual souls before entering physical bodies and material experience. From the Edgar Cayce readings. Question: when did I first exist as a separate entity? Answer: the first experience, of course, was in the mind of the Creator, as all souls became a part of the creation. As to the time, this would be in the beginning. Reading 2925-1. Explanation. This reading teaches that the soul existed first within the mind of the Creator, before entering physical life and material experience. Human existence, therefore, did not begin with physical birth, but originated within the eternal consciousness of God. Edgar Cayce presents the soul as part of the divine creative awareness, suggesting that every person existed first as a spiritual reality before becoming an individual being in earthly life. In this view, creation begins in consciousness before manifestation, much like an artist first imagines a work before bringing it into physical form. The soul's true identity is therefore spiritual and eternal rather than merely physical. Although all souls share a common origin in God, each soul also develops individuality, self-awareness, and free will through experience. Earthly life becomes one stage within a much larger spiritual journey, where the soul continues growing in consciousness and relationship with the Creator. The reading also suggests that humanity carries a deep inner longing for meaning, purpose, love, and spiritual reunion, because the soul unconsciously remembers its origin within the divine mind from which it first emerged. Things to consider. Throughout the day, consciously remind yourself, this person is more than a body, personality, or social role. They are also a soul on a journey. Practice this especially with difficult people, family members, strangers, customers or co-workers, probably even drivers of vehicles. Those who seem lost, angry, fearful, or broken. This exercise helps reduce judgment and increases compassion.
Oh, chapter 5. All souls, every one of us, were created in the beginning. Key idea. Every soul was created in the beginning as part of God's eternal spiritual creation. And from the Edgar Cayce readings, all souls were created in the beginning, all spirit of one spirit, Spirit of God. Reading 900-70. In the beginning, when there was the creating or calling of the individual entities into being, we were made to be companions with the Father God. Reading 1567-2. This entity was, in the beginning, when the forces were first set in motion, when the morning stars sang together and the whispering winds brought the news of the coming of man's indwelling, of the Spirit of the Creator, and he became the living soul. This entity came into being with this multitude. Reading 294-8. Explanation. These readings teach that all souls share a common spiritual origin in God and existed together in the beginning as part of divine creation. Edgar Cayce describes humanity as all spirit of one spirit, Spirit of God, meaning that every soul comes from the same eternal source and carries within itself something of the nature of the Creator. The imagery of the morning stars sang together presents creation as sacred, living and filled with spiritual harmony rather than accidental or mechanical. Humanity became living souls when the Spirit of the Creator entered into conscious individuality. Although people appear separate physically, the readings teach that all souls remain deeply connected through their common origin within the divine. Human beings were created to become companions with the Father God, growing through experience, freedom, and spiritual development into greater awareness of love, unity, wisdom, and conscious relationship with the Creator. Earthly life, therefore, becomes part of a much larger spiritual journey in which the soul gradually awakens to its true identity and shared connection with all life. Things to consider. Cayce says souls were created to become companions with the Father God. Several times during the day, pause and ask, am I living in harmony with love, truth, and wisdom? Does my behaviour reflect my spiritual origin? Am I helping bring greater harmony into the world? Am I becoming more conscious of God's presence? Try to approach ordinary tasks, work, gardening, study, family life, business conversations, as part of spiritual development rather than merely survival or achievement.
So the last one is number 6. However, we may no longer remember our ancestry. So the key idea is through material life and worldly focus, many souls have forgotten their original spiritual connection with God. And the Edgar Cayce readings, as man finds himself in the consciousness of a material world, materiality has often, in the material-minded, blotted out the consciousness of a soul. Man in his former state or natural state or permanent consciousness is soul. Hence, in the beginning, all were souls of that creation with the body as of the Creator. And that's reading 262-89. So the explanation is, this reading teaches that humanity's deepest identity is spiritual, yet material life often causes people to forget their original connection with God. Edgar Cayce explains that when individuals become overly focused on possessions, status, pleasure, fear, survival, or external appearances, materiality can gradually blot out the consciousness of a soul. In this state, people begin identifying themselves only with the physical body and outer personality while losing awareness of their eternal spiritual nature. Cayce states that humanity's natural state or permanent consciousness is soul, meaning that the soul is not something human beings merely possess, but the true self behind all earthly experience. The body is temporary, but the soul remains eternal and rooted in divine life. Spiritual growth, therefore, becomes a process of awakening and remembering, rediscovering the deeper spiritual identity hidden beneath material distractions. Through prayer, meditation, love, self-examination, and service, the soul consciousness gradually awakens again, bringing greater peace, purpose, meaning, and connection with God and others. Things to consider. Cayce teaches that soul consciousness awakens through spiritual living. Each day, intentionally practice one action that strengthens the soul. Pray sincerely, meditate quietly, encourage someone, forgive quickly, help without recognition, spend time in nature, read spiritually uplifting material, sit in silence away from constant stimulation. These practices gradually shift awareness from outer noise to inner reality. That's the end of number 6.